Good day, mates. Today is the 6th day of MAP vocabulary, and I'm pumped because today we have 11 super cool words all about literary devices. So we're going to first start off with what exactly is a literary device. You can find literary device on page 5. A literary device is writing in a way to help the reader enjoy the book more and understand it better. So it's tools that the author uses to help the reader have more enjoyment from the book, to help them understand the book better. Literary devices are all about these tools that authors use. So examples of literary devices or the tools that authors use are figurative language, flashbacks, foreshadowing, humor, imagery, dialogue. These are all ways that the author helps the reader to enjoy and understand the book better. Let's break down the words literary device to figure out what this phrase means. Literary. What does this word mean? This word sounds a lot like literacy to me, which we do every single day. It's all about reading, writing. So the word literary here, from what I already know what it sounds like, I can figure out that this has something to do with reading. Now, what does the word device mean? Device I use all the time in my day-to-day life when I'm talking about my phone, an iPad, my computer. These are all devices. They're all tools that I use to help me in my life. So here we know reading, here we know tools. So by breaking down the words literary and device, it tells me that this has something to do with tools to help readers to read whatever it is that they're reading. Now we are going to look at the word technique. This is on the bottom of page 8. So a technique is a way of doing something. So an example could be using many details is a really good technique that the author uses to interest the reader. Using many details is a really good way that the author uses to interest the reader. Another time when you might talk about techniques would be something like this. A good technique in swimming is to bend your elbows when swimming freestyle. It's a good way to swim to help you swim faster and stronger. So when we're talking about technique, it might be with an author. What techniques does the author use to improve their writing, to help the reader understand the book better? Or techniques might be in our everyday life. So your job now is to explain to your partner an example of a good technique in your hobby or sport, just like I did up here. Now let's look at the word style. It is on the same page, page 8. A style is also a way of doing something. So an example could be, the way the author chooses to write a story is the style they use. The way the author writes the story, that's their style. Once again, we talk about style all the time for reading, but also in our everyday lives. Something that you might use the word style for is to talk about the style of your clothes, your fashion style. So to practice using this word style, describe your fashion style to your partner. So now let's get specific about the different types of literary devices that an author might use. The first one we will look at is dialogue. This is on page 3. We have talked a lot this year about dialogue, so you should be able to, on your own, right now in your packet, write down the definition for the word dialogue. I bet your definition looked something like this: people talking in the story. Here's an example. Wow, Harry is so cool. No, he's not, said Draco. Notice how in my examples I have quotation marks around the outside of the quotes in the dialogue. It is really important that when you have dialogue, you make it known to the reader that it's people talking by using these quotation marks. So now in your packet in the third column, make up a possible dialogue between two characters in your book. It's okay if you don't have exactly everything memorized that your character says. Think of something that could possibly be said between a couple characters in your book. Did you have quotation marks in your quotes, in your dialogue? It's really important that you do. Now we are going to talk about imagery. This word is toward the bottom on page 4. Imagery is writing so that the person reading can know how it looks, sounds, feels, smells, or tastes. As you're reading, you should be able to picture it in your head, feel like you're almost really there, experiencing it with the character. That is an example of imagery. So let's read the example together that creates a lot of imagery in the reader's mind. This is in that third column of your packet. There is an example of imagery. I could hear the popping and crackling as Mom dropped the bacon into the pan. Soon, the salty, greasy smell wafted to me. There are some really descriptive words in this description here. As I'm reading it, I can really picture exactly what that was like. I can hear it. I can smell it. I can almost feel like I'm tasting it. There are lots of details in this explanation here that help me to really picture this in my mind. This is a really good example of imagery. So finish this sentence to your partner. To create imagery, you need a lot of... Here's how I would finish this sentence. To create imagery, you need a lot of details. Now, please look at the top of the same page, page 4, for this word foreshadow. We have mentioned foreshadowing before this year for sure. Foreshadowing would be a clue for what is going to happen later in the story. So talk to your partner. What can we foreshadow? So a clue about what's going to happen later. What can we foreshadow about what will happen in wholes? What clues did the author give for what is going to happen? So what I'm thinking is there's probably going to be something that happens with the sneakers, the shoes that Stad works with. He mentions them at the beginning of the book, and it seems a little random to me. Why would the author mention these shoes? The author said something about how they got him in trouble, but we don't know yet. So the mentioning of the shoes is a clue for the reader that later on something is probably going to happen with them. So now in the third column, draw a picture that represents foreshadow. Here's my picture. I drew a picture, I know it's so beautiful, of Stanley with his sneakers. These sneakers are the clue that the author gives for what is going to happen later in the book. Now please flip back one page to page 3 to find the word flashback. It's the word at the very bottom of the page. A flashback is thinking back to something that happened in the past to give background information and explain the character's motivation. So this is when a character is living their life, the story's going on, and then all of a sudden they think back about something that happened in the past. This thinking about in the past helps to give the reader a better understanding of what's happening in the present. So to help us better understand what a flashback is, let's read the example of a flashback together. In the third column on flashback, it says, "I walked in the room and remembered my brother. I saw him sitting in the chair smiling at me. That was before he died." So this is a story, something's happening, he walks in the room, and then all of a sudden the character is taken back to the past. He's picturing his brother sit there in the chair smiling, but obviously this is not actually happening in the moment because his brother has died. So talk to your partner. Why would an author include a flashback in a story? Why would they mention the brother sitting there smiling? You might have talked about how it helps the reader to better understand what is happening currently to the character. So with the brother dying and the character having a flashback to the brother sitting there, the reader understands better how the transition of his brother dying might be really sad for him. It might be really hard. He remembers the happier times with his brother, and maybe it's hard for him to accept that his brother has died. He still thinks of him being alive. It's hard for him to really accept that he's gone. So having this flashback helps the reader to better understand what the character is thinking and what the character is going through. Now let's take a look at the word irony. This is on page 5. So we have 2 definitions for this word irony. The first one is saying words that mean the opposite of what you want to say. So this would be like sarcasm. Here's an example. "I'm so excited to do my homework." It's sarcasm because you aren't really excited to do your homework. It's irony. You aren't really meaning to say what these words actually mean. So tell your partner another example of sarcasm as irony. There's a second definition of irony. This would be a situation that ends differently than expected. Here's an example. A police officer gets a ticket for speeding. That's not really expected. Most people expect police officers to be following the rules, to not be speeding, and so if a police officer were to get a ticket for speeding, breaking the law, that's ironic. That's not really what you would expect to happen. So now tell your partner what would be an ironic situation for a dentist. For me, what I was thinking would be, it would be very ironic if a dentist got a cavity. You would expect that a dentist would take very good care of his or her teeth and would keep them very clean. So it would not be expected if the dentist did not take very good care of his or her teeth and ended up getting a cavity. In their writing, they use the same words and phrases that they would use if they were talking out loud. It just really sounds like them. There's a lot of personality. So let's look at the example in the third column of the packet. It says, when the author writes, there is so much voice. So much of her personality is in the writing. I almost feel like she is actually talking to me. Now your job is to decide with your partner which example has more voice and explain why. Don't just pick one. Explain why which one of these has more voice. Here's the first example. I am going to tell you about ice cream. Example 2. Have you ever been so hot on a summer day that you dreamed of something refreshing to cool you off? Ice cream would be the perfect choice. So decide with your partner now. So for me, I said that example 2 had more voice. And the reason why is because there are more details. The author is asking the reader a question to make them think about their own life. It's much more interesting to read. It actually sounds like the author is talking to me. Now on the same page, page 9, 3 words up is the word tone. The tone is the way the author writes to show their feelings about some topic. Here's an example. The author really hates puppies, so his essay on puppies had an angry tone. The author's feelings about puppies were really negative, so these feelings were shown in the essay about puppies. He had a really negative feeling, really angry tone. So talk with your partner. What kind of tone do you think the author would use if he were writing about his favorite puppy? This is a different author now, someone who actually likes puppies. What kind of tone do you think they would use? Finish this sentence. I think the author would use a blank tone because blank. You might have said, I think the author would use an excited tone because they're talking about their very favorite puppy. So they're really happy about it and really just excited to tell you all about it. Our last word for the day is on page 5. It's toward the bottom. It's the word mood. So the mood is different than the tone. The tone is all about how the author feels. The mood is the way the reader feels after reading some writing. So examples could be the reader feels inspired or annoyed, depressed. This part in your packet is the one where you should have drawn the arrows because Miss Taylor made a mistake and accidentally put the examples for mood next to motivation. So these examples are accidentally in the wrong row, but they should be right below in that third column, these 3. So in that same box, write 2 more possible moods a reader could feel. What are 2 other ways that a reader might feel after reading? Here are 4 examples I came up with. The reader might feel excited, surprised, depressed, confused. There are tons and tons of feelings a reader might have after reading. So that is our last word for the day. That is the end of day 6 vocabulary. You now, I know, are more than capable of being able to do the homework for day 6.